A great detective will completely solve the qualia problem. Qualia are the textures that we consciously sense, such as red or pain. Opinions seem to be divided as to whether qualia exist or not. Not only does it explain what is correct, but it also explains the psychology behind why people make mistakes. Let me explain a thought experiment called the inverted spectrum. Suppose you look at an apple and perceive the qualia of red, answering red. Suppose another person also looks at the same thing and answers red. We cannot deny the possibility that that person also perceives the qualia of green. They may be calling the qualia of green red. Suppose qualia are other people's subjective opinions, and cannot be known objectively. In other words, qualia have no effect on the physical world whatsoever. For this reason, some people say that there is no point in discussing things based on the assumption of qualia. In that sense, some people say that qualia do not exist. Let me explain the thought experiment called Mary's room. Mary grew up in a room where she could only see black and white. When she sees red for the first time, she will feel something she has never felt before. Some people claim that this is evidence of qualia, but this is not correct. Mary can only perceive it as different from any other known color. Objectively speaking, qualia are simply a distinguishable state. There are three main positions on qualia. One, if we can't know them objectively, then there's no point in discussing them. If we can objectively explain everything in the world without them, then they are as good as non-existent. Two, qualia certainly exist, they just can't be known objectively. The fact that I actually feel them is evidence of their existence. Science is not omnipotent, and it cannot be denied that there are things we don't know. Three, qualia can be objectively inferred. I will explain this third position. Let's consider the state of the brain during the inverted spectrum thought experiment. When we see a red object, a certain neuron fires. The state of sensing the qualia of red corresponds to the state of that neuron firing. That neuron is also connected to the word red. Similarly, there is also a neuron corresponding to the qualia of green. Suppose another person also sees the same object and says red. That person's neuron connected to the word red will also fire. However, we cannot deny the possibility that that neuron corresponds to the qualia of green rather than red. What if that other person was yourself, traveling through time? It is unlikely that your future self would see a red object and feel the qualia of green. If our brains are physically the same, it makes sense that the qualia we feel would be the same. There is no need to go to the trouble of time traveling. If we compare the you of now with the you of 1 picosecond ago, we have the same brains, so the qualia we feel are also the same. Even if they are not exactly the same, if their brains are similar, we can infer that their qualia will be similar as well. We cannot see other people's subjective opinions directly, but we can infer them. Let me explain the psychology of this misunderstanding. You sense red qualia not inside your skull, but at the coordinates where the apple is located. You are told that these qualia correspond to a certain state inside your skull. You interpret this as remote phenomena being linked between the inside and outside of your skull. Interpreting the two as separate phenomena gives the illusion of freedom to link them differently. In reality, there is no freedom, as qualia are determined once the state of the brain is determined. These are simply different expressions of the exact same phenomenon. When opinions clash, there is a problem with the way the problem is posed. It becomes strange because it assumes that we can't know anything about other people's subjective views. We cannot know the truth about other people's subjective views directly, but we can know them by inferring. What is truth, anyway? When we see something with our eyes, we are only indirectly inferring the color of the object from the photons that enter our retina. Everything we know is just inference, and perhaps we know nothing of the truth. Perhaps what we call truth is just another inference. There is not always just one truth. That's all.